Good afternoon and good evening to many of you joining from around the world. Good morning to some of you joining from around the world. This is Josh Rubel from Pexera Health, and I'm very excited to be moderating this conversation. We're going to be starting this conversation on imaging and pathology AI here in about 2 minutes as more attendees file in. So just give us 2 more minutes and we'll be kicking off. For those of you just joining, we're letting attendees find their way into the webinar. Thank you again for making time for us. We'll be kicking off the conversation in just about 1 minute. Okay, we've hit the starting line, team. Everyone, my name is Josh Rubel. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Pexera Health, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar focused on imaging and pathology AI. Um, the The ground rules for the conversation are we're going to have a very wide-ranging conversation from leaders that have really kind of both led the way and also experienced the value and maybe some of the issues and challenges, and also have great insight into what the future of AI holds, in particular in imaging and pathology. And the ground rules are we're going to have a conversation, and I'm here as a moderator. Hopefully, at the end of this introduction, mine is the voice you hear the least as part of this dialogue. Our objective simply is to share real-world stories, get a sense of impressions of value, and again, maybe some lessons learned in the field related to the use of AI in imaging and in pathology, and maybe, just maybe, get a glimpse of what the future might hold. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Tiago Braga, Dr. Reza Forghani, Imad Nijam, and Professor Mohammed Shora. They're all going to introduce themselves very quickly, and then we'll jump into a sort of conversation around the reality and, again, the future of AI. Let's do it in the order that I asked, gentlemen, or that I introduced you, gentlemen. Excuse me. Let's start with Dr. Braga.
Sure. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for having us, Dr. Schroeder. Thank you. So Tiago Braga, ER radiologist with Jackson. I also serve as the VC Vice Chair for IT and AI for UM. In addition to that, we run several governance committees here. I also serve as the director for the PACS team, which lives under radiology. Nice to meet you all.
Dr. Forghani.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you for the invitation to participate in the panel. Reza Forghani, I'm a neuroradiologist, medical AI expert, and I'm the imaging IT physician lead at the Advent Health Central Florida Division. We are a large integrated health network.
Thanks, Reza. Imad.
My name is Imad Nijam. I'm the CIO of Path Group, one of the largest lab and pathology physician groups in the Southeast. Before that, I was the CIO of VRAD, one of the largest teleradiology group, where in both roles I led the AI steering committees, including both internal development and commercial partner development. Looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. And Mohammed Shora. Oh, you're muted.
Hey everyone, so my name is Mohammed Shura. I have two hats today. So I'm the CEO of Pexera Health, and at the same time also I recently joined the faculty of Johns Hopkins Medical School, and I started my journey in AI, imaging AI since 2004, since I was doing my PhD very long time ago.
Wonderful. You can see now why I want my voice to be the one that's heard least. Okay, let's jump into it. Given some of the backgrounds that we just heard, the health systems and the infrastructure expertise that are kind of on display here, let's talk about the reality of AI. And maybe Dr. Braga, maybe we can start with you. When people talk about imaging AI at the University of Miami, um, what is being used? How is it being used? Give us a sense of the lay of the land.
Sure. It's a very good initial question, Josh. So, what we try to do at UM, and I'm speaking off of my experience here now, is essentially we try to plan the work and then work the plan. So, what we've been doing for the past 5 years or so is, researching the landscape, looking at solutions that can help us out with the issues we have currently, trying to improve efficiencies for our radiologists. also improve care for our patients, right? So I guess you have to start from that point. So that guides you on your journey. So we've been doing that, looking for vendor solutions, commercially available solutions, deploying FDA cleared solutions. So currently, we have several solutions that are on prod and several solutions that are, under pilot, right? We have three major vendors. I'm not going to name them, but we've been working with several of them, initially implementing solutions that are triage CAD-T solutions, which have yielded very good results for us. So you can imagine sometimes, an incidental PE, for example, being on the list for two days, a day or so, if we're waiting for an outpatient result. And now those surface to the top of our list. We can take care of them immediately, right? So we've seen a decrease in time to treat and time to diagnose based on triage. That has helped us a lot. So that was a good result, initial result. We did several pilots with triage algos in 22. We're able to implement them on prod. And the next step now, it really goes into the diagnostic side of it and the detection side of it, as well as workflow related solutions. So we're building workflows. We have several teams. We have teams of clinical coordinators, nurse practitioners help us out with several different workflows. But in the end, what we're doing is, we're going into this field slowly and carefully in a phased approach, but we have a lot of hope for the future.
Reza, I wonder how that kind of lines up to your experience in various settings that you've been in. Tiago talked about triage to start and now into diagnostics. I wonder if that is a sort of industry-wide phenomena.
I think that, yeah, there's definitely some shared interest and approaches here between us, both in my former and current institution. We are also really taking two tracks. We are interested in things that are triage, moving more on diagnostic decision support, quality, safety. But we have, and even in my last position, one I would like to say low-hanging fruit that I saw is operational use of AI to enhance operations. There are a lot of friction points in healthcare. Some of those are diagnostic, but many are not. These are friction points both for clinicians, and this is particularly relevant in imaging when there's a significant shortage of radiologists and all the institutions are trying to tackle increasing volumes. And also for patients, our organization's mission is to really lead to be a preeminent consumer-focused organization. And that has a lot of elements to it. That's quality of care, but it's also things like turnaround time. So we really are pursuing, similar to my colleague, both tracks. We are doing things that are increased safety. Let's say if there's a long work list, can highlight pathology that could be a threat to the patient so they can be interpreted faster. But there's really also a large focus on operational aspects. Some of these are meant to increase radiologist efficiency, such as next generation reporting that we have been using and we intend to increase more. Some are other aspects of automating, retrieval of data tasks that, let's say, you do not need an expert to spend time on, so that the radiologist can really focus on those high level things. So those are really where we are doing. We are really both pursuing this in some ways. We are in an accelerated phase right now. And of course, we are doing our intermediate to long-term planning, where it goes a little more into the more sophisticated diagnostic support tools that are emerging in the market.
I would love for you to double click on the reporting comment you made. I think it lines up nicely with what Tiago mentioned, triage and diagnostics, and then got into efficiencies. Reporting comes up a lot when we talk to radiologists as something they have to do. That's what goes out the door after an image is read. Say more about where AI might be helping you today in advanced reporting.
So that's a very interesting comment. Indeed, depending on how familiar you're with radiologists, I know at my last institution, sometimes I would ask people who work closely with us, I would ask, what is the output of our work? And sometimes people struggle with that, right? Because ultimately we interpret images, but the output of our work is a report that should have relevant information, but importantly should form an impactful impression that guides patient management and gives recommendations, right? And we spent quite a bit of time in that. We have come a long way. Radiology was very early to adopt voice recognition, computer-based voice recognition that really increased our turnaround times from what used to be days to weeks to, minutes, right? Ideally, and our hours. And I see that even a few years ago, we had a partnership. I don't want to name any vendors, but we actually, at my last institution, which was an academic institution, we formed a partnership with a major industry partner focusing on that because I see that as a low-hanging fruit. If you think about it, as an expert, especially in the time of shortage, but any time, doing things like typing and transcription is probably not what you would want us to spend time on. And there's significant opportunity in doing that. There's also actually a quality and error. For example, let's take measurements. I always joke that why would you want me to dictate and make a digital input analog and then make it back digital? The only thing I can do in that is introduce an error. So spend time and introduce an error. So this area is very active. Again, without naming vendors, companies started a few years ago doing things like auto impression. And sometimes the efficiency gains can be, not exaggerated, but they can be overblown. But nonetheless, if deployed properly, there is a significant efficiency gain. Now we are moving more. This field is moving very rapidly, as you can imagine, because of large language models. That they changed the landscape, brought some new competitors in the space, and some of the old competitors also using those platforms, and more things like ambient reporting, where you just say a few things and then the computer actually organizes that. And there's some other things that are coming up in this space. I would encourage everyone to look at that because, sometimes whether a diagnostic support saves you time depends on the software. There's some debate, but usually there's no debate. I've never heard a radiologist telling me that I would like to type more. I'd like to spend more time on transcription. And, so it's really an opportunity for gained efficiencies and increasing turnaround times.
I love it, Imad. I'm positive you get that feedback from your sort of clinical constituency. Chime in here. What's your sense of the sort of state of play in pathology and given some of your radiology background?
Yeah, I mean, measurement is a perfect example where the computer is really, really good at it. And I love how you phrase it. The only thing I can do is introduce error. That's brilliant. And I've seen it. We've all seen it. A lot of our radiology colleagues have done it. They click and drag. Then they kind of eyeball the next biggest axis as they scroll. Then they click and drag. Then they pull out their iPhone and do 4.2 times 3.8, and they dictate in measurements. That should stop, right? There should be if you're measuring an aneurysm or something, you just click on it, and it should be able to volumetrically measure it perfectly. And even if it's perfect within plus or minus whatever degrees, it's still better than the eyeballing effect that we're doing. It's a more complicated scenario in the world of pathology because sometimes pathologists, part of the diagnosis process or identifying the stage of cancer or so on, they measure certain cell by cell by cell compared to how many total cells are in a slide, and is there enough tissue for that determination, right? So a huge part of the time is counting cells, whereas the analysis of that counting is really the value that the physician brings to the table, and that's where they should be kind of spending their time on. So I just love the way you phrase that. The reporting piece is also super interesting in that I think a radiologist can let's take the simplest modality, an X-ray. They can look at a chest X-ray within 5 seconds, figure out exactly what they're going to say, and then they spend 5 more minutes creating the report, right? That's something that gets, the numbers are bigger with a more sophisticated modality, but these are the kind of efficiencies we want to go after. If, kind of a point and a comment to the audience, anybody who hasn't really jumped into AI yet, these are kind of the first stages of early adoption. They're kind of easy places where you can get tremendous value. And if it doesn't work, you can still do your job. It's not at the point where it's in the patient care critical path.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Shura, chime in. The state of the industry.
So I would like to talk about the technology itself. So I remember my first 1990, my first computer science class with Dr. Hakim. He told us that if the technology of the computer, is existing in the flight or the aviation industry, we would take a flight from New York to London in 1 minute, and that was 1990. And I would say now, if we have the same technology, like the pace of the technology and the AI happening now is existing in the imaging, nobody's going to report anything. Everything will be automated. And we will see actually, when it comes to aviation, we'd go anywhere in 1 second, just like in a blink of an eye. So the problem is, the imaging industry, in the AI especially, it's still very slow compared to the pace of the AI technology. And again, we have seen, again, we saw every day, like new models and new algorithms and new companies, is again being established and incorporated, in AI, and producing and amazing things, especially for the last 6 months. And every day there is a new revolution. Is AI in imaging catching? No, it's very, very slow. And I remember 2004 when I was in my PhD developing my first my again an algorithm to detect the coronaries, and how the coronaries are moving in the heart in the cath lab. It took me in the MATLAB. I would leave the PC for 2 days to run like an algorithm to train a very limited data. Now we can do that in a microsecond. But the problem is we are facing many, many problems with technology. First of all, the number of algorithms needed is massive, right? Whether it's image classification, image segmentation, or analyzing, a multimodal information, or again helping in writing a report, or helping in measurement, or creating an agent. We're talking about unlimited number of algorithms. If we talk about only the imaging, classification and segmentation, counting the number of cancer and disease and findings, we will be talking at least about 10,000 algorithms. We're now status quo, if like, of the industry, with all the commercial AI algorithm vendors in the market, and I think the PACS vendors still struggling with, where they are with the AI. Are they going to integrate with marketplace, or are they going to have, develop their own algorithms? Academic Medical Center also still struggling. Are we going to develop our own algorithms, or are we going to buy it from other vendors? The algorithm vendors also, are they going to do the old like style of like pixel interpretation and machine vision, or are they going to depend on foundational model? And that's what we are into technology right now. Again, we don't know what's like how things will be going.
I think that's a perfect tee up. Guys, I'm going to stop doing the point to you for comments. And I'm going to, because I think Dr. Shore, what he just did was he said, all right, there's a ton of complexity out there in terms of commercial innovation and getting some of these algorithms into the space. And there's a giant need for those algorithms. It's a perfect time to start talking about, like, okay, what are the challenges and some of the strategies your institutions are dealing with? And I think it's going to help this audience if you have that conversation kind of in public without me sort of prompting you. So, Nijam, you were right before Mohammed, but you're sitting in the world of how do I get some of these things into our stack so that our providers can use it? I'd love it if you started this conversation and the guys just chime in. So it's sort of an in public discussion here.
So I'll say some things that are somewhat cliche, but they're true. And one of them is you gotta find a problem to solve that is meaningful for you and your organization. AI is not one thing, right? There is no, I'm just going to go get AI and check that checkbox. So find a thing that's really impactful to your organization. What is, when I was at VRAD, 80% of our volume was emergency radiology. So reducing, turnaround time was the number one metric. So anything that impacted turnaround time has higher value than anything else. So that was just one lens at looking at AI consumption. The, so when you talk to institutions and, the getting it through the door, the ROI has to also make sense. So you need to find a partner that can work with you to create the ROI. Unfortunately, where you got to follow the money trail at some point, and that's usually the biggest problem. And again, every organization is slightly different for their appetite for innovation. One thing that will change all of that is if the the reimbursement model changes. So right now, there is no reimbursement, so you have to justify the spend through efficiencies or physician satisfaction, patient care. You pick a metric that makes sense to your organization, and you kind of laser focus on that. And you start, you crawl, then you walk, then you run.
Yeah, can I pick up from something that Imad said? He said the word the beginning of this, and I completely agree. I think we're at the first innings of it, but there's a lesson that is very important, and I like to say that the AI you're using now is the worst type of AI you're going to use going forward, right? So it's only going to get better from now on. But there's one thing that we cannot buy, which is time. So my experience is that I think we're jumping into, yes, agentic future for AI, but that means it's going to be a hybrid kind of workflow, right? So it's going to be the radiologist or the healthcare provider and the AI. It's not going to be the AI by itself, right? So if the AI is saving us time and we're becoming more efficient and time to treat is decreasing and we're showing value, I think what you should do with that extra time that you have, if you have any extra time, is to actually give more value back to the enterprise, right? So I think that's going to happen in the near future. But one of the things that we need to do all as professionals, I think, is to uh, accept that this technology is coming, flow, because that's going to help you. In the end, you're going to have to learn how AI reacts to your knowledge and how it's getting better with you. So if I have to say one thing is start early, start tinkering, and then learn from it.
Really building on some of what was said, some excellent points were made. I really want to emphasize, what Imad mentioned about impactful AI. So remember, AI is a technology, it's part of informatics that would not be necessarily clinically relevant. And we have to be mindful of that, right? So, and sometimes I almost felt sad. People would come to me that worked on all these things, and I would look and say, but no one's going to use this. It doesn't fit, right? So you need more domain expertise. And I'm excited about how the way the industry is evolving is going to enable us. Touching on the return on investment, I think that's key. I'm unfortunately on the older age spectrum, right? And a lot of us were trained, don't ever ask about money, don't think about finances, doctors. To be honest, I'm not sure if that was really a good approach. It sounds altruistic, but someone has to pay for things. Someone has to pay for people to get care, right? And if you're not sustainable, then you don't provide the service. So I think thinking of the return on investment is really important. And we have to be active about we are bringing this, we are spending resources. Where do we get value? Quality of care, efficiency. Billing is a very complex thing, so I don't want to get into that because that's a whole other thing. But we do need to think about what is the impact of what we're bringing if you're thinking of the health enterprise. Billing, how slowly we adopt. At the same time, we have to understand the domain, right? We're in a very high stakes business. So that's the first part. So the tolerance for failure is very little. The second part is we have a very complex regulatory structure. And I can give you a number of examples of AI that right now cannot be fully taken advantage because some of the regulation, for example, in the United States that manages that sometimes is, let's say, probably tailored to injecting a drug into a patient rather than something that an expert is going to look over and pass by. And I think some of those reforms could accelerate. And then there's a question of trust, right? And we have to take into account that's the physicians having trust and the patients. So although it's slow and I would like it to go much faster, I think those are things, and if you're conscious about those, we can address them and help the technology really reach its full potential. I'd like to finish on two couple on the excellent points that were made. One is, AI is just a tool, as was just mentioned, right? And to use it effectively, but also safely, because that's going to be our ultimate goal is to do no harm, protect our patients. You need to understand strengths and weaknesses. So for example, sometimes as much as I'm a big fan of the foundation models, large language models, sometimes it does scare me though, that because if you don't know their limitations, these things can make up things. They can hallucinate. It's not that there are no solutions, but when you deploy these, you really got to know what is the strength and what's the weakness so you don't do harm. And then the last thing sometimes, and sometimes I like to call myself as I get older, champion of the boring. AI is like an icing on the cake, but a lot of our problems, if you look at a lot of health systems, are informatics, IT, is probably not geared towards this digital revolution. By the way, that's not the hospital IT's fault. Traditionally, they were under-resourced. And I think if we are going to undergo this transformation, we need to invest more at the core. Some of this AI is not going to work well if you don't have the infrastructure. With cloud, by the way, if you don't have good internet connectivity, all of those things matter. And actually, one of my focus, both at my last institution, but especially at Advent Health, is to bring in platforms and work on the infrastructure that enables us to be scalable and really take advantage of this AI revolution.
Mohammed, I definitely want your perspective here.
So I'm always saying that like maybe first grader, second grader can identify objects, he can speak, he can form sentences. And that's actually what like somehow let's say the early version of ChatGPT, can do, but and then there is more of education. So anyone can somehow, if he has a PhD or he learned a little bit, he can be an expert in a specific, topic. Problem in imaging that like if you want to have like a human understand imaging and read, let's say MRI, you need to get to finish high school, go to medical school, and maybe spend 7, 8 years in continuous again education, and then get like a master degree, a PhD, and right, and spend hours and hours and hours and reading thousands of cases, right? And we have here two radiologists, and again, that's still difficult again for the AI. It's not like again understanding a statement or again drafting a letter or like creating a presentation. It's much more sophisticated than that because the human nature is not like any kind of picture. Again, and a kid will identify that this picture is a human, this picture is a sea, this picture is a garden, but it's impossible again for maybe again me as an engineer originally again will be able to tell anything about an imaging. And again, like people do mistakes, radiologists even do mistakes, and that is very catastrophic for for the people, right? Like people can lose their life because they were misdiagnosis. So again, we're talking about an AI. We're talking about very critical, aspect, and hallucination is killing, right? Like because if there is a hallucination, an AI algorithm that will give, let's say, a wrong measurement or a wrong report or a wrong diagnosis or diagnosing let's say, a white circle in the middle of the brain as a cyst, not a tumor, then again, we lose the patient, right? Like patient can lose seen that happen. So it's very, very critical, and actually it needs a lot of collaboration between the greatest minds again everywhere. Again, we're talking here about audience again from everywhere, and actually in the US it's very regulatory is very difficult, and then you have to get an FDA and it has to be validated. And even if you have an algorithm that can identify multiple, like what happened with one company, they have 136 finding in a chest X-ray, they were facing a problem getting, the FDA for that. Again, I went to Germany to attend, the first conference, and I've seen what Europe, and Europe is totally different and very reluctant to use the AI. Again, some other parts of the world, Middle East, Latin America, Africa, Asia, still it's very early. So we're talking about very critical, very difficult problem to solve. Again, but the future, if there is like an alliance between the how fast is the AI technology going, and again start using that in the industry, with less regulation that still protecting the patient safety, I think we can get like a great results.
I would love to hear in terms of the challenge. Guys, can you spend a minute or two talking about adoption challenge? Dr. Khalil Solomon from Texas put a question in the chat in the Q&A, and I told him we would touch on it. I mean, Imad, you talked about finding a use case that's got a real value proposition as a starting point. But Khalil's question simply is, hey, if you're an aspiring sort of AI user in an institution and you happen to be a provider, so at the physician level, how do you spark some interest at the institution? Imad, I think that's where you were heading with your comment around, find a use case with ROI where you've got institutional value, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. Maybe we talk about the challenge of adoption from his perspective.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And let me say one thing, and then I'll punt it to Thiago and Reza as well. But I think this panel is representative of the kind of people you want involved. It's the combination of a CIO and a CMO, or a CIO and a chief of radiology. You need somebody from IT, and you need somebody from radiology to drive this forward. AI is the ultimate intersection of medicine and technology. And, this it can't be an IT project, and it can't be just a bioinformatics project, or some radiologist that's interested in it. You need to formalize it, put a team together that is kind of cross-functional. And as you mature in your thinking, it'll become more cross-functional. You may include ethics or operations, or, growth, or other aspects of the organization. But on top of my comments earlier, I would also add just like picking a team that's as cross-functional as possible, because this will impact everything, starting with kind of tech and medicine.
Other adoption nuggets, Tiago, Reza, that might be useful?
Yeah, I can jump in here. I think it's initially, I think it's a question of education, training, but that's just the initial step, right? So broadcasting the information throughout the enterprise, I think it's very important. But you need help. This is not a one-person job. This is, many people working with you. So having the right champions, the right team, the right people who are involved and want to be involved and want to get their hands dirty, you really have to do it to learn. I think that's the best way to learn, really, is to, yes, keep up with the literature for sure, but also try to get involved. So even with that, and we've done that, there are challenges, of course, and I think it's human. It's normal to accept that people are at different speeds of adoption. Just accept that that's going to be the reality, right? So we have the early adopters and you have the laggards and you have people who are not going to accept it to the end. But if you go beyond the 50%, 60%, you're over the hump. It makes it easier because then it becomes kind of like a network effect, right? So that's what we leverage here is the network effect. So if this helps you at all, find the people who are interested. Sometimes they're not going to talk to you directly. Talk to them, see if there's anyone that wants to help you. And it goes from there. Give them something to do. People feel great if they have a project that they're primarily responsible and you can help them out and supervise. And then the chatter starts within the department, and then everyone else, eventually starts contacting you, and then you can give more and more information, and you create kind of like a movement, right? So that's the way we see things here. That's the way we try to implement and grow that kind of momentum. But there's one more thing. The other thing we're trying to do now is to actually use AI to teach AI, right? So again, not getting to names here, but you all know there are several different ways of using AI, generative AI, to generate avatars with content that is primarily yours, that you can just plug into those avatars and distribute that somewhere internally, so people have readily access to that information. So that's very important. When people start understanding a little bit better, the fear level goes down and the adoption goes up. It's all about engagement, right? So the more you teach them in every single way you can, or you spread the word, I guess that's a better way of saying that, the more people are going to join your cause.
Building really on what was mentioned, I think I can focus really, I won't repeat everything because excellent points were already made. In terms of, I think you can think of this, maybe break it down into two different aspects: successful adoption and provider buy-in, administrative buy-in, and then maybe what are some opportunities in the future. Let's start with the first. I think the first thing to do is, as was mentioned, you have to be familiar. You need a multidisciplinary team, and you want to make sure things actually fit in workflow, right? So you're going to propose a tool. Yes, it sounds cool. It does something well. That's not enough. How does it work in a daily busy physician's life? How does that work? Right. Then you can do online searches. I write papers, sometimes advising, let's say if you're new in the area of what to consider when adopting an algorithm, but that's critical. In terms of your colleagues at the same time, you need buy-in. And one of the unfortunate things that I see, we're just getting busier as radiologists. Well, it's a good and a bad problem. Sometimes I tell our trainees, we are in demand, right? But we are getting busier. And what I've noticed is that because we are so busy, people don't even do a basic training. And think about it. You're going to use a sophisticated tool. Would you like go and do a sophisticated game or a machine or plane, I guess, and not have any training? I think you're so busy, we get this in this circle. We don't have time to learn about technology, see how to use it. And one thing, again, we are actually actively doing is when we bring new things to provide that basic level. Say, this is where it works, this is how it's going to help. Because a lot of your colleagues may not have the familiarity with AI education, which Tiago just mentioned too. There's going to be lots of variation in comfort, and you got to work really on all of that to successfully adopt locally. I do want to touch on actually buy-in from decision makers. In not only North America, but much of the world, a lot of the decision makers ultimately may not be people who practice, right? And that's something that it took me some time to recognize. So if you want people to invest in this, you have to align it, or you have to present sometimes the same content in a way that matters to them, right? So, or align with your organization's priorities. If that is a priority, tell them why this. So don't just say, oh, I'm busy, I'm burning out. That's important. But say, this is how we impact this. This is how we make patient care more safe. This is how we improve consumer experience. In my view, like sometimes we overlook that, but actually that's key because those administrators have their own pressures. You have different people coming with different tools. Someone has to pay for them. So that is very important to try to make sure you align. I also tell my trainees, and I think I'm a proud radiologist. I would say Tiago and I both are proud radiologists. If you see how far radiology came, we used to look at x-rays, sometimes give reports weeks late, something we wouldn't be proud of. Now that's many years ago, right? And now think about it. We essentially see inside the human body, and we are even going into slowly predicting function. We already do that with some functional things and even some molecules. So I think we need to continue to push that boundaries, not only look at our images, because sometimes we get insulated, oh, this is how I do, but how do I impact the patient trajectory or the service line, right? So yes, I make this diagnosis is great, patient is safer. Now, did I improve length of stay? Did I improve turnaround time? Again, I think it's important for us to think about that because that is going to be our value, which is increasing. But also when you want to get buy-in, like in my experience, those things will get traction. And then your administration will want to do that. I'll finish on one last point. It's a very interesting time. And this is more, it's not simple, but some of the tools that are being, again, I don't want to name vendors or sponsors, but the technology has come to a point where more and more, whether it's an app or AI tool, as an individual, you can invent if you're entrepreneurial. It's not that simple. And I suggest if you go that path, you understand the full landscape, including workflow and regulatory, depending on your jurisdiction, because that will have impact. But we are going to be to a point where domain users, the expert users, are going to be able to have the potential at least to solve their own problems. I know that that's a big organization. We are looking at that. And for people who are entrepreneurial, want to invent, there's great opportunities with some of these platforms coming. So if that excites you, it's definitely an area to keep an eye on. And I think you could do really impactful things. As Mohammed said, there's so many things to be solved, right? So having a lot of domain expert users who know what the problem is, engage, and having the tools for them to do it without having a big informatics team, it could be a big breakthrough that's going to come. That's sort of coming and coming more and more feasible over the coming years.
I think if I talk about adoption, I will talk about integration because I think against radiologists again they are measured their time by number of clicks, right, Dr. Reza? Again, how many clicks I'm gonna do in the let's say the 15 minutes that I'm gonna read the study, right? And if like they will spend more 3 seconds, that will be like irritating. Whether that is like a 3 more seconds in the packs or something that they have to move the mouse from a place to place or they have to leave their hand again from the mouse. And we have seen that all the time from radiologists and complaints. So there is an added thing now called AI that if the AI is gonna add 1 second to their time, they will never use it. And it has to save time. So if the AI cannot be used just to tell them that this case has a pneumothorax or tuberculosis, they already know that. Or the AI is gonna tell them, by the way, this is the liver, right? They know that this is the liver. But I think that it has to save time for them. Let's say if they spend like 10 minutes in measuring thing and the AI can measure it accurately without hallucination, and the accuracy is over 95%, 98%, they will use it. If it really can highlight things for them that they can miss it, and that will save the time for them, or an agent that will do something that all the time in that case specifically will do it for them without repeating that, they will use it. And I think the biggest problem in the also the you know the that facing the eye is the integration. I talked about it, in the beginning, that where is now the PACS systems like an AI ready? No, because the AI readiness means in the technology AIR, which is AI results portfolio or profile, AIG profile, and actually like almost none of the PACS companies have. Maybe one company have that. So the integration of the AI algorithm is via snippet, and radiologists are, again, they don't want to snippets. They want to have everything embedded, and that can be imported or like again sent to the reports in an easy way. And again, we're now struggling between three parts: PACS companies and marketplaces, which is actually doing the integration and the algorithm themselves, and then going to the vendors. There is now self-developed in universities, which is mostly developed by students or like PhD students, and then they left to another job and they leave the work and then they start from the beginning, and they lack funding with what's going on now in the US by again the lack of funding, which is also like another big problem facing the AI.
Really, those are two excellent points, and I do want to mention two things. One is it was mentioned. So, what's the impact value and what's the efficiency gain? Ideally, both, right? But the more the impact is marginal, because still some of the AI tools, as was mentioned, well, we have the worst AI tools. I love that line by Dr. Braga. The more marginal the impact, the more the efficiency is going to come into play, because they're like, but why am I going to spend time? I don't need this, right? So keep that in mind. I think the second one, it is a good example of how you can communicate to get buy-in from your administration. So let's be honest. If I come to you say, oh, I click too much, most people are like, oh, nice. Like they might just tune out. We just have to be realistic. So, oh, I don't care about you click or you waited this much to open something. Like most people may not relate to that. But let's turn that around. Let's say we do all these repetitive tasks at the volumes we do. Let's say you do 100 of a task, and 1 minute more, that'd be 100 minutes a day. And the way you can say it is, well, that's time that's delayed in terms of turnaround time. Or would you want to pay someone at my rate to do more clicks or wait for an application to open? Now, if you put it that way, people will understand, because so ironically, actually, there's alignment between the experts don't want to do menial things, and those who pay us wouldn't want us to do that. So some of this becomes a question of communicating the frustration in a way that actually has a material impact on why they should invest in the technology. And sometimes that subtle difference will get you a lot of support in terms of implementing these tools.
Guys, as we've been going through here, we're getting like awesome tactical sort of questions that all peck at some of the points you've been making. For example, how do you get institutional trust? Reza, you just went into, okay, wait a minute, how do I orient myself to my institution at the decision maker level to kind of get something over the finish line and also make sure that it's valuable to them? That's one question. Another question's on sort of pricing models that you're seeing out there and kind of what works at the institutional level and what kind of falls apart. And then the third is from Dr. Wagdi in the Middle East. He's got a question about how to make a decision and how to do comparison work. And this gets to validation over time. But guys, all of those questions are tactical to the tune of, okay, wait a minute. I need to go start to do this now. How do I pay for it? And what's the right price point? And how do I make sure that what I've bought is the sort of right thing for my patients? I would love for you to answer that. Imad, it's been clinical. I want to make sure, like, especially at the operational level, you have a chance to chime in on that. Maybe you can go first.
Yeah, on the IT stuff is a little bit easier to measure when it comes to cost, especially with cloud adoption and which cloud vendor you're using, egress rates and provisioning servers. That's a little bit more easier to manage. You can build a spreadsheet and figure it out. There are hidden challenges around operationalizing it, meaning what do you do when it doesn't work? What do you do when somebody asks a question? What do you do if is there a downtime procedure that impacts the physician's ability to deliver the service? That's kind of, there's some squishy side of the ROI there that a lot of times people don't really pay too much attention to, but it is something that will kind of operationally impact the adoption component.
Yeah, Josh, I think there was something that was said earlier. See a need, feel a need, right? Or something to that effect. So if you can have an open channel of communication with your C-suite and your leadership, I think it's very important to understand what the needs are. So you can pick from your, portfolio of solutions and say, I have a solution that can solve that problem for you. And then go from there, because then the perceived value is already there. So if you solve that problem immediately, the value is, so the feedback is immediate, right? But beyond that, I think that there needs to be conversation, strategy, building with levels above radiology and above pathology. At the enterprise level, I think it's important to reach out to your CIO or CAIO if you have one, understand what's the broad kind of strategy and align yourself with that strategy. I think it's very useful because resources are limited. Everyone knows. And we have the same, anyone in any situation will have resource issues. So if you align yourself with the mission of your enterprise, I think it facilitates things and also decreases duplication and overlap and things like that. So I think the communication piece is key. So keep a channel of communication with your C-suite. I think that's a good way to go about it.
Yeah, if I can add something to that, Thiago, which is to, partner with non-radiology stakeholders. For example, as part of your world in Miami, you have Sylvester Cancer Center, and maybe oncology is a big area of investment. And there's plenty of AI models specifically geared toward oncology, and that may be a faster path if you have alignment between the oncology group, the radiology group, and the IT group. So think of it broadly from that perspective as well.
100%. You
Thinking about
just described
acquisition.
one of
Sorry.
our
Right.
strategies. We're actually doing that, so agree 100%.
You're hired, Ahmad.
I think to the question, adding to what was mentioned, that's going to be an hour discussion of how do you evaluate, choose, and pass. But you can look in the literature. There's lots of papers on that. I can say broadly, there's going to be one thing. First, what problem does it solve, right? Value add. Is it a clinical diagnostic benefit, triage? Is it operational or both? Right? Then there's integration, but I'd like to split integration into two. One is technical, how feasible, how that works. One is workflow. Just because you can technically integrate a software, it doesn't mean people will use it. It also has to fit well in the workflow. Then there's a question of will it work at my institution? Because these data, even though especially the FDA cleared ones have quite a go to a robust process, we know that there can be variation in how they're going to work at your institution, right? And some vendors are getting a little better. The regulatory pathways are allowing a little bit of optimization, but still, that's something to consider. And I would say last one that's getting more and more attention now is what do you do post-deployment monitoring? Did it get your return of investment? Is it performing as you expected? Also, there's something called drift. For those of you who may not know the technical term, algorithms will degrade. They will not perform as well over time. And more vendors are monitoring for that because that's a major safety issue. So these are some of the broad things to think of. I've been a big fan of platforms, partly because they facilitate trials, right? So when someone tells you, hey, here's an algorithm, try it. I think anyone in IT knows there's no free trial. They can give it to you for free, but there's a good bit of cost for you to do security review, implement this time, effort. So no such thing as a free trial. Some of the platforms now, and there's a number of them, actually allow you to make this almost a near costless if you have the platform and you turn on, it's an addendum to a contract, you turn it on, it's already on the platform has already been security reviewed, so you don't need to wait 6 months and invest all that resource. And you can see, oh, does that work on my data? So think about these things. Again, think about the tool, but also if you want to be competitive, think about the infrastructure for the future. And that'll be one of those things would be the platforms.
I would like to compare what happened now. Again, if you remember all the BlackBerry days where we have a BlackBerry and like with this little keyboard, right? How many apps were again existing? Very little, right? We can't just like use anything. And when Apple said like we're gonna have like a phone and then we're gonna create what's called Apple App Store, right? And then you vendors, which is similar to the AI, algorithm vendors can develop your own algorithm. I'm gonna control this process, and then I want to make sure that those apps are secured, accurate, not claiming anything, safe for patient or safe for users. And we're talking about 2 million apps again till now, like in Android, and 2 million apps in Android. And that changed our life forever. So is that revolution is going to happen in the AI? Is maybe the American College of Radiology, ACR, would like, create something where people could create an app, they validate that, and they make it. That I think, that will change really the industry. And by the way, also remember again talking about the revenues. Apple got almost a $10 billion of revenues from the apps. That technically speaking, it was free, but still revenue. So everybody again, the vendors got paid, Apple got paid $10 billion, and everybody was happy. And now it changed our lives. So is that revolution again would come to the AI? Currently with the current ecosystem, it's not gonna happen. Nobody's trying to claim responsibility for this. Everybody's like vendors are trying again to raise more money. There is $4 billion of money again to create algorithms. Universities are again trying to get grants from the NIH again to create algorithms, and nobody's claiming responsibility. That's where maybe the dilemma that we are in right now.
I love where you're heading, and team, for me at least, it doesn't feel like it's been 55 minutes, but it has, and I know we're going to have to close here in a few minutes. You all touched on validation, and it's clear it's a topic, validation and accuracy. With that in mind, yes, there are challenges. Yes, it's not perfect. Yes, we've got platform versus model-specific approach sort of divergence out there. What's the future here? And I like the way Mohammed said it, a second or two ago. There's a lot of people claiming real estate, but like outside of the companies that are playing here, what is the future of AI and imaging and pathology? Like, what is that going to look like? Or maybe what do you want it to look like, with a wider aperture, maybe, 5 to 7 years from now? Reza, what do you think?
Human machine interactions to streamline processes, improve care, and actually start to predict more and more, even potentially therapies and outcomes.
I have to agree with that. I think it's right on target. I think the specialties that are using AI are going to eventually become more efficient. They're going to dominate not only what they do on a daily basis, but they're going to be able to add value to the enterprise. So for all of you in radiology and pathology, I think it's a great opportunity to use AI in a hybrid mode so that you can show that not only you can do a great job in what you're doing right now, but you can add. So in which ways? Care coordination, just to name one. There's so much to be done in care coordination that can use AI, and it's outside imaging interpretation. And it can be done by those of us that are in front of the computer the whole day long, who are the data brokers of medicine, right? So radiology is one specialty, pathology is another one.
Yeah,
Imad?
I would say AI is going to follow the same pattern as every new innovation has followed, which is you have the innovators, the early adopters, and by the time you get to the early majority, it's going to start blending into the application layer as versus a standalone thing. Um, it's happened, it's happened, if you're old enough to remember the first time you used an email, it was like magic, right? And now email is just kind of there, right? I think it's going to be something similar. The biggest thing I think that will disrupt the future is if there's any kind of a payment model that would really open up the floodgates on deployment. The AMA just published a framework around CPT codes for they broke it down into assistive, augmentive, and autonomous. And I think that's a really nice framework to think about your own adoption in that assistive is probably the lowest risk. Start today, get really smart about it, get intelligent around consuming AI. Augmentative, get a little bit more cautious, probably next step, and then leave the exciting sci-fi stuff to the future. It'll get here when it'll get here.
I think there should be an entity again, somehow, again, maybe as I said before, American College of Radiology, whatever, but can I encourage everyone, again, from the audience to, if they are in, let's say, in, hospital and academic medical center and they have little resources to start testing and validating algorithms, if they can do that, or, if they cannot afford to buy, they can try to develop. There's many tools now to develop algorithms. Go to Hugging Face, start like, downloading some models. There's other tools in the market, that can help you to do that and, start seeing what's going on. But again, testing and validation of algorithms is really a key here. That has to be maybe in a marketplace, as I said, similar to Apple App Store.
I love it. There are a couple of things I'm walking away from this session remembering. I agree with Reza Tiago's comments around the worst AI you're using is the one you're using right now. It's only going to get better. I think that's brilliant, and I think that's anyway. I'm walking away with that nugget. Fascinating conversation. Guys, take it one step back. The work that radiologists and pathologists do, pathology is slightly different because it's a slide. But the work that, in particular in imaging and in radiology that they do is they look inside of the human body while the patient still is alive to help understand what's going on clinically, diagnostically with the human being that is getting an image done. That in and of itself is unbelievably valuable, innovative, and it's really quite incredible. I mean, it reminds me of Arthur C. Clarke's third law, right? Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Right? If you told someone 200 years ago that we could do that, they would say, "What kind of witchcraft are we talking about here?" The reality is, it's technology. It's amazing people, brilliant minds, and big institutions have come together to make this a reality. My sense, and that's the framework we all live in. Amazing. And we've been living in that framework now for the last, almost 100 years. My sense is after listening to this conversation, we are just at the tip of the iceberg around where and how AI is going to supercharge that environment to get more value to the patients through the institutions that these gentlemen serve. So just team, thank you very much for the thoughts. For those of you attending, this has been recorded and we'll post a recording through the standard channels. Guys, thank you again. And thank you to the audience for participating with those questions. Really, we're at the beginning here, so we're going to keep this conversation going. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, everyone.